I'm Andy Wolfe, I'm one of the global partners at Arcadia Consulting, and it's a great privilege to be in a studio today with some very respected experts in the field of change and transformation, particularly around the use of story. And it's my great pleasure to introduce us to Dr. Katie Best and to Simon Keslake, and my colleague Olly Woodhead, who is the Director of Global Transformation and Strategy at Arcadia. So today our goal is to really share some experiences, to have a fireside chat, to find some common thread in what makes us really passionate about the growth and the use of story in changing business. But before I do any of that, can I ask you just to kind of introduce yourselves, please? So Katie, do you mind kicking off?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Andy. So yeah, I'm Dr. Katie Best. I'm a leadership coach and consultant. I work with a range of businesses and individuals, helping leaders to develop their competence, their confidence through leadership, and particularly through the medium of story as well, hence close relationship with Arcadia. I'm also writing a book on messy leadership problems, which will be published in 2025. So lots of writing to be done. And I run a leadership agony aunt mailing list, Dear Katie, where people send me in their real problems and I answer them on a fortnightly basis.
Oh, wow. Oh, great. Thank you very much, Katie. That's great. It's great to get to know you a little bit better. And during the course of this, we'll get to know more. Simon, would you like to introduce
Andy,
yourself,
first of all,
please?
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. So, yes, Simon Keslake. I'm the Director of Organisation Development at the Human Dynamics Lab, which is a behavioural science and behavioural economics practice. So I work with generally large global organisations to manage systemic change across the organisation using behavioural science to make sure that change sticks.
Oh, very good. Lovely. I love being around people who are clever, and I love being around people who've got that depth of research and capability in checking out what we do. But let me, before I do any of that, can't talk about what I love too much. Let me introduce my colleague, Olly. So, Olly, would you like to introduce yourself? You're now leading our StoryTrack business on a global level.
Yep.
And just introduce yourself to all of us, please.
Sure. So I'm Olly Woodhead. We've all worked together in the past and are working together now. So it's great to see everyone here today. My role is to lead our global transformation practice with story at the heart of what we do. So we're working with typically global organisations who are looking to connect with their people. And we use story to do that. So really pleased to talk about StoryTrack today, and looking forward to hearing the opinions of our experts in the room.
Very good. Thank you, Olly. And for me, just again, I introduced myself, but my role is I'm the global partner who's sponsoring StoryTrack. I look after our C-suite practice. I tend to spend a lot of my time coaching, like you probably do, senior and very senior leaders through their career transition, through the organizational change they want to lead.
Okay, so I think Arcadia StoryTrack is all about enhancing and developing our ability in organisations for connection and using stories to do that, connecting with people in organisations. If you look at a lot of the methodology that's been developed over a number of years, people have looked at culture change and they've looked at the power of story and the influence of story within culture change within organisations. So all we're doing is taking a very natural step to evolve and develop a proposition which fits with that powerful opportunity to drive and develop stories within organisations. And there's a couple of parts to this. Story creation, that's about connecting individuals within organisations on a journey, typically transformation, typically change, but actually perhaps enhancing performance of organisations. So you've got this really rich opportunity to connect people, to connect individuals, top to bottom in organisations, to create the future of the business.
When we hear a story, we don't just have to take someone's word for it. We can see it in our own imagination. So it makes a future state really tangible, which is so powerful for a leader to use in the change process. But then also, it's so much more emotional. It puts us not just in a mental cognitive state around it, but it also fires up something deeper in us. We're so hardwired to enjoy and engage with stories back from our very early prehistoric days. It's the way we learned our most important lessons, the way we passed on messages. So see that kind of trickling all the way through to the modern organisation. It's incredible the power that a story can have in the change process.
So we want to connect with all of the organisation, and a really important way to do that is to create stories. So we talk about storytelling, but actually really it's about story creation. So it's how we capture the hearts and minds of an organisation and individuals within the organisation. And picking up on the points from both Simon and Katie, I think there are a range of ways we do that through a literal story creation, where we really capture the deepest, darkest thoughts of executives right the way through to individuals who are playing really important roles throughout the organisation.
Ultimately, it is that emotional connection.
Yeah.
We have to drive commitment. Commitment is the key piece here around actually driving change and driving change in an organisation, behavioural change and ultimately cultural change. Understanding effective career commitment, team commitment, individual commitment to an organisation comes down to understanding the emotion someone feels to that organisation, to your team or to your leader. So building that emotion is absolutely critical, moving beyond the logic and getting to that emotional side of things. When we can do that, we can then start to see people really engaging differently, committing differently, and driving performance at a team and an organisational level.
So I think where I see story most powerfully is when you've got leaders who really, really need to engage in that transformation, often even with themselves individually. So they haven't quite gone on that journey. They're not quite where they need to be. And you see how starting to think about things in terms of stories, in terms of where they've been, where they're going, and how that is in parallel with the organisation is really powerful. Once they can start to think about that narrative, and then that there are more steps in that narrative journey and that there is a future, I think it's absolutely transformative for those leaders.
Story is a key mechanism for building trust in leadership, because you start opening yourself up. You open yourself up to potential ridicule. You open yourself up to honesty. You open yourself up to being authentic, telling people about yourself. And when people start to understand you as a human being, as an individual, people can start to relate to you more. People can start to believe in you a little bit more. And through that, you start to trust those individuals, and then you start to follow people a little bit differently.
I don't think listening's ever been so important for the reasons that we've already touched on. But, you know, if we were to summarise some of those, you need to listen to people because we want to be more diverse and inclusive organisations.
Yeah.
People want to feel heard. Yeah. People want to feel that the organisation is taking their values and their behaviours into account. And also organisations that don't listen are enormously missing a trick in terms of understanding their own customers, understanding their stakeholders, and taking those opportunities a way to be a better organisation, whatever that might mean for them.
Do you think organisations need to listen differently?
I think they need to listen more powerfully. And by that, I both mean they need the more powerful people to listen, but they also need to become better listeners who really do use those skills. One of the big things that I talk about in my book is how leaders really need to develop their own research skills. Because it's not enough to just say, well, I've used that information or I've listened to that person. What do you do with it? What does it mean? How do you know when you've heard enough or you've heard the right thing to actually be able to take action?
The story has to be truthful. It has to be, and we've used the word many, many times, but it has to be authentic. I mean, look at the fake news agenda today. You know, it's everywhere, right?
Literally, don't get me started. It winds me up so much.
So when you to build that trust, it has to be authentic, and you have to have faith in the person and trust in the person that's telling the story as well. And that is a skill. It's a capability that can be developed. And I know that we've been doing a lot of work with leaders and with execs and boards around how they can build that authenticity genuinely. So it's not just a playbook. It's not just something that they say because they've been told how to say it. Actually, they genuinely mean it, and what sits behind that. That authenticity, it's only through that authenticity that we can build trust. We can then start building those stronger relationships in an organisation.
teaching people to tell the stories that are right, the ones that fit, the ones that work for the organisation. So balancing that authenticity with also what is it that's going to further the message and the aims and the goals of the company, whether that's the really small individual story that lights a spark in your team that gets them to do something, you know, all the way up to the bigger story that we're talking about. But teaching people the language of how to compose and tell their own stories is really powerful itself.